Hey everybody, welcome back to True Crime. I'm your host, Andy Hale. I'm with my favorite investigative journalist, true crime author, award-winning investigative journalist, George Jared. He has been covering murder cases, all kinds of news stories for 2 decades plus. He's featured at CrimeCon in 2021, 2022, featured in the New York Times. He's won numerous first-place awards with the Associated Press Managing Editors, Arkansas Press Association. He's a member of Case Breakers, a national organization dedicated to solving some of the most notorious unsolved crimes, including the Zodiac murders. I could go on and on. And he's also written over 100 news stories about the West Memphis Three case, which is what we're going to talk about today. So there is no better expert to be on this podcast right now than George Jared. Welcome.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for having me.
I could have gone on and on. I mean, you got an impressive bio, brother. So West Memphis Three, we've talked about this. It's been a while, but we've talked about it before. I know there have been some updates, which is what I want to cover. But I think we should, for people that are going to be listening to this for the first time, I think we should kind of lay the groundwork for the West Memphis Three. 1993, the murders of 3 boys in West Memphis, Arkansas. Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers. And how old were they?
They were all 8 years old.
8 years old. This is one of the most heartbreaking cases to me. And there were 3 teenagers, I guess I'll call them, that got charged and convicted of the murder, right?
Yes. Damian Eccles was 18 at the time. Jesse Miss Kelly Jr. was 17, and Jason Baldwin was 16.
Unbelievable. What really strikes me is how young the victims were, and then how young the 3 guys arrested were. And tell me first where the little boys were found and what the crime scene looked like.
Sure. So the 3 boys had been riding their bikes in their West Memphis, Arkansas neighborhood on May 5th, 1993, and it's late afternoon. They vanish. The next morning, they're found in a little wooded area that abuts the neighborhood. It's called Robin Hood Hills. And in the middle of this wooded area is a drainage creek. And it's kind of strange because this wooded area is actually adjacent to I-40. It's where I-40 meets I-55. So basically, you're talking about, it's like the truck stop capital of the world, because you've got all the traffic coming north, like from Canada through Chicago all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And then you've got all the traffic coming on 40 going from, the West Coast to the East Coast, basically, and vice versa on all those routes. So they're found in this little wooded area. It's thick with vegetation, some pretty big trees, a lot of aquatic life, turtles and fish and things like that. And when they were found nude, and they were bound ankle to wrist with their own shoelaces. The boys were hogtied. And so if anybody knows anything about hog tying, it's a method of tying something up to move it like in a slaughterhouse.
So a couple things with that before we get into how these 3 teenagers get charged. It's such a horrific crime scene to think that these boys, you said they're naked, and they're hogtied. What strikes me right off the bat is are there bikes nearby? Are there bikes found nearby? Yes,
they found the bikes in the same general area that their bodies were found. Same general area, but yes.
So do you think when they were attacked, they were not riding their bikes? Because it just seems like if they're on their bikes and somebody's trying to get them, it seems like one of them probably would get away. I wonder if maybe they just parked the bikes, were sitting in the woods, hanging out. What do you think about that?
It's an excellent question. I've never been asked that question. All the years I've covered this case, all the stories I've written, I've never had one time somebody ask me about the bikes, about them possibly being on the bikes. It's my opinion that they definitely were not on the bikes, because none of the injuries, if you look at the autopsy reports and the stuff that came out in court, none of that would be indicative. There's no injuries let's say, to their knees. If you get knocked off your bike, the first thing you're going to have a knee, ankle, You should have, scrapes to your hands. Now, Christopher Byers did have some defensive wounds to his hands. I don't know if they would be consistent with falling off a bike. So, wherever this happened, because I have strong opinions that it probably didn't happen in the wooded area. But yeah, no, they were definitely not on their bikes, in my opinion.
Oh, so you don't think they were killed in the wooded area?
No, I talked to an FBI profiler about it, and he said it's almost a certainty that they weren't, because one of the boys, Christopher Byers, had significant blood loss, and they didn't find a drop of blood in the woods. So,
wow.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, it's in his autopsy report. He had significant. Some of his organs were pale. He had so much blood loss. And
so what would that mean? That means like where was the speculation that they could have been killed?
What the profiler told me, and I've actually talked to several other experts and attorneys and a lot of other people connected to this case, what they theorize is that the boys were killed in a house, a dwelling of some kind of garage, a shed, something that would muffle sound. Because one thing that's interesting, Andy, is that this wooded area that abuts their neighborhood, there are houses right there. I mean, I took Jared Bradley from, he's the CEO of MVAC Touch DNA testing. Last year, he was in town. He was doing one of his MVAC. He was training the Jackson, Tennessee Police Department how to use an MVAC machine. And he called me up. He's like, hey, man, would you just take me on like a little tour of where all this stuff happened in West Memphis? And I said, sure. And we went out there. And I mean, and these houses are old, so they were definitely there in 1993, and they were right there. So how anybody wouldn't have heard the boys screaming is beyond. It just doesn't make any sense. But if you're inside a house or a garage, the sound is contained, and plus there's no blood found. So
the weird thing to me is, all right, so let's play that out. Let's say they're killed in a house. Now you've got to get the bodies into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's not super hard. You could do that at night, but you're going to bring the bikes there too?
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that's just a way to make it look like, I don't know, it all happened there. That's awfully strange. So how these boys are found, and is there any evidence of sexual abuse or no?
No, there's not. And that's one of the biggest hangups in this entire case is because Jesse Misskelley Jr., who has an IQ of 72, he confesses to the murders. Okay, he confesses that that they committed this crime. The problem is that you can punch holes in his story all day long. He gets everything wrong. He says the boys were tied with ropes when they were tied with their own shoelaces. He could not identify the area where they were actually found. He said the boys were abducted in the morning when obviously they were abducted late afternoon, early evening. And most importantly, he said that 2 of the 3 were sexually assaulted, that they were sodomized. Here's the problem. All the forensic experts for the prosecution, all the forensic experts for the defense agree on one thing about these 3 boys. There was no sex assault. No sperm was recovered. And I hate to say it, but there was no anal tearing or bruising. And all 6 experts who testified at the Rule 37 hearings for these guys, all 6 said exactly the same thing. There is absolutely no way that 3 boys of this age could be sodomized by 3 teenage boys and there not be physical evidence of it. There was no evidence that any of that happened. And so when he confessed, and he confessed a couple of times, and his confessions got a little bit better each time, I talked to his attorney, who's now a judge, about that, a guy named Dan Stidham. And Dan told me one time in his office, he just laughed. He goes, well, George, you got to understand, he went to trial and he started learning what actually happened to these 3. And so he started learning more about his case, so that it was easier the next time he was, confessing to do it. So, but anyway, in all of them, though, he said they were raped, and they were not.
So what was the cause of death?
For Stevie and Michael, they had received blunt force traumas to the head, probably not fatal, wouldn't have been fatal, probably knocked him unconscious, though. And then they drowned in the creek. Christopher, it was undetermined. They said he could have either drowned in the creek or he might have actually died. He might have succumbed before he got into the water because of the blood loss. But I'm going to tell you right now, the person who did the autopsy on Christopher, they've done some pretty shoddy work, and it wouldn't shock me at all if he just misidentified and that actually he just drowned in the creek as well. Because Dr. Warner Spitz, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Spitz, he testified at the Rule 37 hearings that he thought that Christopher had actually drowned.
Wow. So what's a little weird about about what you just said is it seems odd to me that the boys would be beaten inside a house, inside somewhere, but not dead when they're taken out. Like, and I, this is just Andy Hale. Like I'm no expert on any of this. This is just, me me sitting here playing Monday morning quarterback, right? But it seems weird that you take them, like you kill them in location A and then take them to location B when they're not even dead yet, especially if it's blunt force trauma. Do you think they were killed intentionally?
No, I don't. I don't think they were killed intentionally because it's a very sloppy crime, to be honest with you. I think if we had used, if we had just even modern DNA techniques, modern policing techniques, that a crime like this, if it happened today, would probably be solved in a few hours, to be honest with you. I just don't think that this case is that complicated. What complicated this case is the police and the prosecutors came up with this ludicrous theory that these three boys were sacrificed in a satanic or occult ceremony.
How does that even come about?
Well, I'll tell you how it starts. When the boys were found, they had all these they were found the next day around 1:30 the next day. And what happened is there was a guy named Steve Jones. He was like a social worker who had worked with some of the youth in West Memphis, and he was a very Christian guy, and he was dead convinced that they were practicing Satanism and that this was a big thing going on. And you remember the satanic panic of the late 80s and early 90s, I'm sure, Andy. And so he was involved in all this. And Damien Eccles had been one of the kids that he had worked with. And Damien Eccles has told me this story. He said he would mess with him. He knew he was very ardently Christian, so he'd go in there and just say these outlandish, buffoonish things to try to get this guy going, in his words. And one time he said he went in there and told him that he just wanted to have a baby with somebody just so he could sacrifice it. And and he didn't mean any of it. He was just, lampooning this guy. And see, Andy, and here's the problem, and I can take anybody that wants to hear about this, I can take you straight to the case file and prove to you that they didn't build a case against these three. What they did is or against Damien Eccles. That was their main target from the beginning. They didn't build a case against him. What they did is they created a case against him. And it was a bad case, but they still did it because here's the thing. Andy, and you're an attorney, so you know all about this. You'll get this argument. Let's say you and I are sitting in the same room, and let's say, your producer's sitting in there, and I pull out a gun and I shoot you, okay? Well, your producer just saw me do it, so automatically I'm a primary suspect, okay? Because there's a witness. Somebody says, hey, George shot Andy. Okay, that's the first one. Then there's a second one. What if me and you are in a room alone together and I shoot you, but I get stupid and my wallet falls out of my pocket, okay? Or some piece of evidence that directly links me to the crime. That's scenario 2. Okay, I'm a primary suspect. The third way I'm a primary suspect, Andy, is if I walk into the police department and I say, hey, I just shot Andy Hale. And so then I'm a primary suspect. Well, if you don't have one of these things, a witness, a camera, okay, then you have to do an investigation. You still have to investigate on those other scenarios, but you have to do an investigation to figure out who your suspects are going to be, okay? And in this case, they didn't have somebody confessing to it. They didn't have a witness to it. They didn't have some overwhelming piece of evidence, like a gun that's registered to somebody at the scene that they left or something like that. So guess when the boys' bodies are found, Steve Jones is out there. He says to the officers who are there, he says, I guarantee you Damien Eccles had something to do with this.
That is so outrageous. I could scream. That is so outrageous.
Yeah.
I could scream.
Yeah.
And then, first of all, it's so outrageous that he would say it. And B, it's so outrageous that the police would like feel like, oh, we got our guy.
Yeah.
So that's how he first gets named. This Steve Jones at the crime scene says this.
Yeah. Yeah. So the May 5th is when the boys are abducted and most likely murdered. By May 7th, they've already interviewed Damien Eccles once.
Wow.
And there are already pictures of him in the case file.
Does he wind up ultimately confessing?
No, Damien Eccles never confessed. He steadfastly maintained his innocence throughout.
So all right. So I thought I can't because it's coming back to me. So what's the evidence against him if he didn't confess?
Nothing.
Oh my God.
I'll tell you. I'll give you just a very brief overview of the things that were used against him. So the primary witnesses that were used against him, they said that right after the murders, that Damien Eccles and Jason Baldwin were at a softball game, and these two girls were there, two young girls. They were like 13 and 14. They said that they overheard Eccles talking to Baldwin and a couple of other people, and he said, we got those three, and we're going to get two more. Now, here's the problem with that. Number one, those girls couldn't identify Damien Eccles in a lineup. Okay?
Oh, my God.
And that was
that's kind of important.
Yeah, kind of, and guess what the judge did? He didn't allow that to be used in court.
Wow.
He ruled it inadmissible. Secondly, they couldn't name anything that was said before or was said after. Okay? It was just that blanket statement. Thirdly, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. I don't think they could even identify the actual day that they heard it. They just know that they heard him say it at some point. And then the fourth thing that I'll tell you is one of the girls admitted that she lied after the fact. And the mother of the other girl told a Memphis police or TV station when the three finally got released that she thought her daughter was lying too.
Wow. And the judge didn't allow any of this evidence at the trial anyway, right?
No, they testified.
Oh, they testified. Oh, just not about...
No, they testified.
Oh.
They said that they overheard him say it. And they were thought, the jury, when the jury was deposed later, jurors said that they were the most reliable witnesses that they heard.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. That is frightening.
And so the second thing that was used against them is this is junk science now, but there were some fibers found that at the scene that they thought matched like a house coat that belonged to Jason Baldwin's mother. Well, in the 90s, this fiber evidence the FBI thought was reliable, but then come to find out that 97% of all fibers, basically, there's 3 or 4 stores in the world that sell all of our clothing. People don't realize that. And these fibers are common in any house in anywhere in the country. So it's junk. It was all junk science. And then they found, and this is probably the most absurd part. So the reason people focused in on Christopher Byers because he was emasculated. And what they don't understand is they think that his penis and testicles were cut off. They were not. They were degloved. The skin was removed. Dr. Frank Peretti, who was the medical examiner for the state and the prosecution's key witness, said that a trained surgeon with a scalpel, it would be almost impossible for them to do it on a live human. He testified to that in court. But then there was no knife ever found, and so they're moving towards trial. And like 8 months after the fact, after these guys are arrested, the prosecuting case has an epiphany, Andy. He goes, you know what? Jason Baldwin's trailer house abuts an industrial lake, a dirty, disgusting industrial lake that you couldn't fish in, you couldn't swim in. It's so murky and disgusting from all the chemicals and oil and whatever's out there. He says, I bet there's a knife out there. So divers go in, and a reporter at the scene even told me, someone who was there said the reporters were told exactly where to stand. They told the photographers where to stand. And then all of a sudden this diver comes out of the water with this knife in his hand like this, like he's, just grabbed Excalibur and, he's coming out of the water like King Arthur style. And I don't know if you know much about diving. You don't find stuff that quick. And guess what else we found out later that they didn't tell the defense attorneys? A year before the murders, Jason Baldwin's mother found that he had this Rambo-style knife in his room, and she did not allow her sons to have knives. So a friend was over when this happened. She yelled at him. She took that knife and she threw it into the lake right behind their house.
Wow.
That friend told that story to the prosecutors right before they sent the dive teams out to find the knife, but they never divulged that to the defense.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. How bogus, even if they found the knife. I mean, that knife could be anybody's knife, could have been there for any time. Like, there's no link to the crime,
Right.
What's crazy to me is that these kids even get charged. So I get Damien Eccles gets implicated by Steve Jones.
And Andy, I would like to add just one other small detail, just so the absurdity can waft over people. This knife has like a 9-inch blade. All the forensic experts agreed, and it was almost comical. They were like, there is no way you're going to use that knife to skin something so small. And here's the
delicate, You'd had to have like an X-Acto knife.
Right, you'd have to have a scalpel. That's what they said. It would take a scalpel. Now, here's the thing. On all 3 of those bodies, Andy, all 3 of them, you know what none of them have? a knife wound.
Wow.
Not one. And so, and why would you skin a penis that you don't have the technical skill and you don't have the equipment to do, the tool to do it anyway? Why wouldn't you just cut it off? You have a knife.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
So Damien Eccles gets implicated at the crime scene by Steve Jones. Okay, I get how he gets wrapped up in this. How does Jesse Miss Kelly and Jason Baldwin, how do they get looped in?
How they get looped in is that Jesse confesses, so that's the start, and Jesse says that Jason was involved. And so, but I will tell you this, Andy, after his initial confession, the police take his confession to a magistrate to get warrants to arrest these guys. The magistrate listens to his confession and says, this is not even close.
Oh, wow.
So they had to go back to Jesse and they had to clean up a bunch of stuff.
They had to make it better.
And against Jesse, and I will say this, there was a woman named Victoria Hutchinson who testified, she testified that she had attended a satanic spot with Eccles and Miss Kelly. Jesse would babysit her son occasionally because their families knew each other. And he was 8 years old too. He was friends with the three boys who got murdered. And for a while, he claimed that he actually saw it happen. And the police actually believed him. It turned out he was lying about all this stuff. Well, Victoria Hutchinson testified against Jesse, but then she told me she was so messed up on drugs and so feeling so guilty because she lied that they couldn't even put her on the stand against Eccles and Baldwin. Okay. And then she later recanted and said, I did not attend the satanic spot. She was facing a credit card fraud charge, and the police told her, you either come on board and help us or you're going to get this credit card fraud charge. And she signed a 109-page affidavit saying that all this happened. And she looked me straight in the face, Andy, like we were in court one day and I was standing outside and I saw her walk in and the doors open and Jesse was sitting there at the defense table. And she looked at me and there was just tears running down her eyes. And she goes, I'm the reason that man has been in jail for 15 years. And I looked at her.
Wow.
And I said, you lied in a potential capital murder case? And she said, I did. I lied.
What, do they have separate trials, each of these three?
What happened is Jesse had a separate trial in a different town because he had confessed, but he was refusing to testify against the other two because now he was recanting his confession. And so what they did is they tried, and this was intentional, they tried Damien Eccles and Jason Baldwin together because quite literally, Andy, if you want to build this case that somebody would believe that Damien Eccles was involved in the occult and that this was an occult killing, you could make that argument to a jury. If you didn't hold Jason and Damien's trials together, Jason never would have gotten convicted. No, there's nothing against him. There's literally nothing. And he wasn't, some shady character, who was out, with a long trench coat and allegedly, they said things like Damien Eccles was drinking blood from animals and all this other stuff, which was all not true, by the way. But Jason made good grades in school. He was in school the next day, made an A on an English test and made A on an art test. The next day, the day the boys' bodies were found, you think after you ruthlessly slaughtered 3 little kids, you think you might take a day off from, 10th grade.
I just, what's so hard for me to wrap my head around is why, and I've seen this in so many other cases, why law enforcement is so quick to name a suspect, charge a suspect, kind of wrap the case up when they know how flimsy it is. Like there couldn't have been any, and then here's the other thing, I probably fault the state's attorney's office even more because state's attorneys are guardians for, the process. So like here in Chicago, the way it would work is for felonies, a state's attorney would have to, a police officer could go to the state's attorney and say, I want to bring murder charges against George Jarrett. Mm-hmm. And you got to go to the state's attorney felony review division. And they would say, okay, what's your evidence? Oh, my evidence is, I just think he did it. Well, the state's attorney's office doesn't have to approve charges. They can say, no, you don't have enough. Keep investigating. They're the gatekeepers, because sometimes I think the police officers, just have a theory or they have some stupid, they want to close the case. But state's attorneys who are going to prosecute the case how do they charge these three teenagers? That's even to me more egregious than anything else. Like they decide, hell yeah, let's go to trial against these kids. And were they potentially capital cases at the time?
Yeah, no, they were capital cases.
Holy shit!
Damian Eccles went to death row. I mean,
oh my God, that's scary. It is so scary. It just blows my mind. So they have trials. They all get convicted.
Mm-hmm.
They all get convicted, and I think they served like 18 years.
Yeah, something like
and
that.
And what happens? What happens after? And I'm sorry, I'm giving like this is a super condensed version here. We could talk for hours and hours about this case. What happens 18 years later that leads to them getting released from prison?
So what happened in the years after they got convicted, that they released the documentaries, the Paradise Lost series, and then a documentary called West of Memphis with Amy Berg. And I consulted on a couple of those. And it was the absurdity of the crime. Even in 1996, when the first Paradise Lost documentary came out, it was absurd. People were like, there's no way they did this. So millions of dollars got raised. And so what happened was they were able to get way better attorneys. They were able to do some like modern DNA, science type stuff. So in 2007, all the hairs that were collected from the crime scene were DNA tested. Now they couldn't identify the donors of all the hairs, but there's 3 people they could conclusively rule did not donate the hairs, all of them, not one hair. And that was Damian Eccles, Jesse Miskelly Jr., and Jason Baldwin. So, wow. Andy, what that means is, statistically speaking, if you base it on the DNA testing of the hairs, and they collected a lot, there were a lot of hairs tested, that means it is more probable that you and I were the ones that killed those kids in the woods that day than the 3 guys who went to prison for 18 years.
Wow.
Now, here's the deal. One of those hairs was found inside a ligature that bound Michael Moore. That hair is a 98.5% positive match for Terry Hobbs, who is Stevie Branch's stepdad. Now, on a tree stump next to where the bodies were dumped, another hair was found. That hair is almost a certain match for a guy named David Jacoby, who is Terry Hobbs's alibi witness when the 3 boys disappeared. Okay? So the reason that they got released in 2011 is because a couple of the key players in this, the prosecutor at the time, Scott Ellington, was getting ready to run for Congress. Dustin McDaniel, the state attorney general, was getting ready to run for governor. And here's the thing. They were careening towards a new evidentiary hearing. It had been ordered. The Arkansas Supreme Court, based on the fact that these other hairs had been found and didn't belong to any of them, but they belonged to other people who could potentially be involved, they ordered an evidentiary hearing to be held. It was going to be held at the end of that year, it was 2011, like in December. And so pretty much what everybody in August of 2011, actually very poignant because they got released on August 19th that year, so we're coming up on that anniversary. What happened was all these guys behind the scenes, they knew it was going to happen. And Judge Laser, who eventually released the guys, he was a new judge in the case. And he even said it. He said that we were going to go to an evidentiary hearing. They were going to get new trials. And the prosecutor told me, says, if we had to go to trial again, they would be acquitted. There's no question about it. And he literally... And
they're not even going to get retried. Like, who are we kidding? They're not even going to get retried.
No, they're not going to... No, they would not. Because literally their entire case, their garbage case that they put together, completely crumbled. And so it wasn't that they were doing anybody some big favor. They were just saving face, which is fine, And I've tried to explain this to the prosecutors and some of the people. They weren't even the prosecutors that made this case back then. It's all those guys are retired. They're gone. They're not even in the system anymore. Judge Burnett, he's retired. John Fogelman and Brent Davis, the 2 prosecutors originally, they're gone. So I never understood why these prosecutors kept defending this case. I mean, it's so...
I got personal experience that in 2 of my cases, in my Cleve Heidelberg case in Peoria and my Chester Weger case in LaSalle County. I mean, it's not on your watch. This happened, in both cases, it was 50 plus years earlier, yet you see state's attorneys trying to protect the victory, trying to protect the trial victory. Yeah. And I even cited a really good law review article in one of my motions about this inherent bias that state's attorneys have, that they have this bias as state's attorneys of wanting to preserve the victory, even though it wasn't on their watch. there's oftentimes this implicit bias about, looking like you're soft on crime if you somehow vacate a conviction and all these things.
Soft on crime if you go get the right person. I mean,
yeah, I know. Even though their job is to seek justice and not merely to convict. I mean, I've seen this so many times. And so, after 18 years, all three get released. Correct?
Yes, I was in the courtroom the day they got released. I actually broke the story when they were getting released. I beat the New York Times by 2 hours.
Look at you. Well, you should be. I mean, you'd written over 100 articles about the case.
Yeah, and actually, Andy, I think it might be pushing 150 at this point if I went back and actually counted.
Wow.
So it's a strange. I mean, it is. I quite literally compare it. There's only one other individual case that I can compare it to, just because of the sensationalism and the fact that the internet came about like publicly a year after the case happened. It's John Benet Ramsey. That's pretty. I
was going to say, I knew you were going to say that case. Yeah.
I mean, those are the two to me. I mean, and I don't count like serial killers and other cases, when I was going to tell you, Andy, by the way, I drove right past the turnoff for Starved Rock. A couple of weeks ago, my buddy, I was noticing all the Lincoln stuff on your background there. And a buddy of mine wanted to go to a Milwaukee Brewers game for some reason. He just likes to go to different baseball parks, and we'd never been.
It's a good park.
Yeah, it was nice. We actually went on a park tour up there, and on our way back, we stopped in Dixon, Illinois, to see the Reagan Boyhood Home. And then
I've been there.
You've been, I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I had a client who was at Dixon Correctional Center, so I'd go to Dixon a lot. Yeah. Go ahead.
Nice little town. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I got a couple favorite little food spots there too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And then we stopped off at the Lincoln Presidential Library because I wanted to go by the tomb. I'd never been there
Springfield?
before. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, the Lincoln Library is amazing.
It is.
I got a whole other case we'll talk about. We'll do a podcast where I'm trying to recover a deathbed photograph of Abraham Lincoln. I don't know if I've ever told you about this, that was taken after he was assassinated. That's a whole other story. We'll do a podcast about that. So then you saw the Starved Rock, like an exit to Starved Rock State Park?
I did, and if I'd had time, I would have went down there.
Oh my God. We'll have to do an episode where I tell you about Starved Rock, and then you can give me the reactions, kind of like I'm giving you the reactions to stuff I'm hearing about West Memphis 3. We'll do that, because I'll just tell you, you're telling me about all the ridiculous theories about, the knife being the Rambo knife cutting off the penis. I'll tell you the stories about what the state's attorney's office argued about my hair evidence in the Starved Rock murder case. It'll make your head spin.
Man, that thing you texted me the other day, I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, unbelievable. I'm still my head is spinning like a top. Can you see the fumes coming out of the top of my head?
I can.
Yeah. So 18 years in prison. So they get out, what year? 2011. All right, 2011, they get out. So they're out now. So how are there new updates now, and what are the new updates now?
Okay, so this is what happened in early 2020. Damian Eccles and Jason Baldwin and Jesse Miss Kelly Jr. all said that if there was any way to solve this case, like through science or whatever, that they would be more than willing to do it. Now, in 2020, they approached the prosecutor, Scott Ellington, and said, hey, we would like to do touch DNA testing, MVAC DNA testing on the shoestrings that bound the boys, the ligatures, okay? And, the thing about shoestrings is they're very rough, and they pull a lot of skin cells. And I actually had a conversation with Jared Bradley, the CEO of MVAC, about this. Skin cells are really good. MVAC's good at picking up skin cells. Now, the boys were placed in water, so it's very possible that evidence just washed away.
I was wondering about the water. How does the water affect it? But go ahead.
It could wash it away for sure. There's no doubt about that. So there may be nothing to it. But this is what we're certain about. If there is evidence on those shoestrings, it almost certainly is from the killer or killers, because the last person to tie those knots, that would be the last person to touch them. So, and they're tying knots. So there might even be some skin cells up in the knot, which would be protected from the water. So if you could just
right,
and what's going to happen is there's going to be a mixture of DNA. You're probably going to have the boys' DNA on there. You're probably going to have the police's DNA on there. But you should, if you have the right lab, if they can get in there and pull those DNA signatures, if they can fix those DNA mixtures up, then you'd have something. Well, Scott Ellington's the prosecutor, and I like Scott personally a lot. I've known him very well. I've known him for years. He agreed to do the testing.
Good.
So that's 2020. What? That's in March. It's in March of 20.
So that's 5 years ago.
Right. So Scott had ran for a special judge. I think a judge had either retired suddenly through illness or something had happened. I don't remember exactly what. But he ran. It was an election, a special election. He ran for this judge's spot, and probably literally a week or two after he agreed to do testing, he gets elected as judge. So he's no longer the prosecutor.
Oh, no.
And yeah, so the governor of the state of Arkansas at the time, Asa Hutchinson, who ran for president and who was no big fan of mine, he wrote me a letter one time. I'll tell you all about that story one day.
My.
He was really pissed off that I wrote about him, lying in public. He didn't care for that too much. But anyway, he appoints a new prosecutor named Keith Cressman. Keith Cressman is an attorney from West Memphis. And so the pandemic, and the main thing that happened in March of 2020, besides this, obviously, the pandemic started. And so that stopped everything in the judicial system. So honestly, it wasn't on my radar. I didn't even really think about the fact they've requested the testing, for, 8-9 months because everything was shut down. So nothing was happening. So then in April of 2021, I go to a Kiwanis Club meeting in the town of Jonesboro, which is the town where the trials for Eccles and Baldwin were held. I'm sitting there. Keith Cressman, who's the new prosecutor, is going to be the guest speaker. And I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll just chat with him. I didn't even know he was going to be there. So I sit at a table with him, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about doing this testing? And he's like, well, we're not going to do it. He goes, I'm going to ask a judge to order all the evidence destroyed.
Destroyed?
Destroyed, because technically when the guys agreed to the Alford plea, technically by the books, that's a second-degree murder plea. And so in the state of Arkansas, they only have to keep evidence in a second-degree murder case for 10 years. Well, the 10-year anniversary was coming up in August of that year.
Wow.
And I looked at him and I said, are you sure? I said, I know that's the law, but I said, are you sure you want to destroy that evidence in this case? And he goes, yeah. So long story short, not long after I had this conversation with him, of course, I write a story about it. It blows up. Everybody goes crazy. Everybody's mad. They say that all the evidence was destroyed in a fire. This gets leaked out of the prosecutor's office.
Destroyed in a fire?
Yeah. So then Mara Lavert, who wrote the book about the West Memphis Three, Devil's Knot, she FOIs all the fire records on public property in Crittenden County, which is a county where West Memphis is in. And after her FOI request, there was not a single fire on public property in 25 years in that county. So that was a lie. So then they said the evidence was just lost. It wasn't a fire, it was just lost. That was a lie. So then finally, they went to a judge. Eccles' attorneys went to a judge and said, hey, we want to know where this evidence is at. And so the judge ordered them to open up their evidence locker room in West Memphis. And so his attorneys walked in, and sure enough, all the evidence is sitting on a table, neatly in bags and boxes and everything. The bikes are there, everything, and it's sitting in the corner as it's been sitting there for however many years. And 10 minutes after this happens, the police chief in West Memphis resigns.
Wow.
So I call the mayor and I'm like, what the is going on? And he's like, oh, it's just a coincidence that he resigned 10 minutes after they found stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So then fast forward to 2022, they have a court hearing where a judge says, okay, so Arkansas had passed this new law after these three guys were convicted. And basically what the law said is, if you have been convicted of a crime and, like, let's say DNA testing advances, you have a right to petition to have that testing done. Seems like a common sense, logic thing.
Yeah.
Andy, this judge says in court that these three guys are out of prison, so therefore the statute doesn't apply to them. As if there's no penalty. And I even said this at the time. I said, so the only penalty for being charged with a crime is imprisonment. If you're charged as a heinous, notorious child killer and you're free, then you're not facing any penalty, which is absurd because, of course, you're facing penalty. You walk down the street, people think you're a murderer. That's
who you are. In fact, these guys did Alford pleas, right? So they maintained their innocence, but they had to still admit guilt to a lesser charge, right?
That's Technically, they did, yes. I mean, and when they gave their plea in court, they said, I am innocent of this charge, but I acknowledge that the state has enough evidence to potentially charge me. They didn't even go to the extent of. So, yeah, they had to plead to that, which is absurd. So anyway, interestingly enough, a side note, right around the time of this hearing when this judge decides to, completely, obviously made a mistake. At the same time, I was actually interviewing Terry Hobbs, the stepdad whose hair was found in the ligature that bound the boys.
Yeah, I was going to talk more about that in a minute. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. If we're going to talk about it in a minute, I'll say that.
We can go right now. I mean, because I was going to come back to. I'm looking at my notes. I'm like, wait a minute. You said the stepdad of Stevie Branches is Terry Hobbs, and his hair is found on the ligature of Michael Moore?
Yes, not his stepson.
Yeah, like, what?
And here's the thing, Andy, I want to make this very clear. Terry Hobbs' story is that the day of the murders, he comes home from work, Stevie is already gone. He never sees Stevie or his friends that day at all. He says, I never saw him. He takes his wife, Pam Hobbs, to work. She worked at a local restaurant. She was a waitress there. So he goes and drops her off, and then he goes and plays guitars with this guy named David Jacoby, whose hair was found on the tree stump next to where the bodies are dumped.
Which is awfully strange, too.
Yes. And then he says, according to him, he says that he just went out and started looking for Stevie because he didn't come home. And then at 7:30, or 8 o'clock, Christopher Byers' parents, John and Melissa Byers, they call the police. And the police car pulls up in their house, and it's a woman named Regina Meek, the officer. And as they're filling out a missing persons report for Christopher, Dana Moore, they live across the street. She walks across the street, and she starts to fill out a report for Stevie, but the officer says, "Hey, these boys are going to show up in the next 5 or 10 minutes. They're just out goofing around. You told me he's wearing a blue Cub Scout, outfit. If I see a kid in a blue Cub Scout outfit, I'll bring him home." Okay. So they don't fill out a report for him. Terry claims he has a cousin that's a writer, and they wrote a book about the case called Box Full of Nightmares. Terry claims that he reported Stevie missing when all these other kids these other two reported missing. Here's the problem. Number one, the officer said she never spoke to Terry Hobbs that night, period. Number two, there's no contemporaneous report started for Stevie. Like the other two already had, one had a report and the other one had a report started. Number three, John Mark Byers told me to my face when I asked him about it, he said, Terry Hobbs is a liar. He can't tell the same damn lie 2 times in a row. The third one, wow. Melissa Byers, she's deceased now, but when she testified at both trials, she described the scene when the boys were reported missing, and she said Terry wasn't there. Dana Moore testified, and she said that Terry Hobbs wasn't there. And here's the other thing, Andy, if I don't know if you have kids or not, but
yeah, they're adults now. But yeah, I have 2 kids.
Mine are adults too. They both graduated.
Yeah, my daughter actually works for me at my law firm now, which is amazing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So if heaven forbid, when one of your children was 8, they're missing. They're vanished. Who's the first person you're calling?
If one of your kids is missing, I mean, I'd probably call my wife, my spouse.
Exactly. So Terry claims that he reported Stevie missing, but he never told Pam at work that he was missing.
Wow.
And here's the other thing, Andy. I told you a second ago. He claimed he never saw the boys that day. How can you report someone missing if you don't know what they're wearing?
Wow.
And the restaurant, and the restaurant was only a couple of miles away. So my natural inclination, if I'm worried that they're missing, I would be like,
yeah, drive over there.
Yeah, maybe they just rode their bikes over to the restaurant, to see the mom for some reason. And so he didn't do any of that. In fact, Pam told me the story, and she told me this story in 2009, okay? She said that when he showed up to pick her up from work at 9:30 that night, that he walked right past her, went to a payphone, and called the police from there. Well, here's the thing, Andy. If you had reported Stevie missing earlier, why are you reporting him missing again?
Yeah.
So, and that's all in the case file. So when I said...
It doesn't jive.
Right, it doesn't jive. And I'm not saying that Terry Hobbs did it, obviously, but what I'm saying is that I said to you at the beginning of this that this case might have been able to be solved early, within a day or two or a week or two or whatever back then if we had everything, that we know now as far as science and all that. So fast forward to 2022, when this whole thing is going on with this judge saying that, basically get out of my courtroom, this statute doesn't apply to you because being a notorious child killer is perfectly fine. I interview him and I ask him the question. I said, do you want this DNA evidence tested? And he said, I hope a judge does the right thing and orders all the evidence destroyed.
Well, I mean, you talked about this at CrimeCon, didn't you?
Yes, that's where we met. Yes.
Yeah, I remember this. Like, he wants the evidence destroyed. Yes. Don't you want justice for your stepson? Don't you want to solve it?
Yeah.
Was Terry Hobbs ever considered a suspect by law enforcement?
No. In fact, this is going to...
Why not? Despite with the hair being found there, why not?
Well, they found the hair years later. But here's what's crazy. All the parents were interviewed initially in the initial investigation. All the parents were interviewed. He was the only parent not interviewed. And he was...
Why not? I think in any case, I think in any case where somebody is found dead, the family is always the starting point. I mean, that's just routine procedure, Right. We're going to talk to the parents. We're going to talk to the siblings. We're not saying you did it, but hell yeah, we're going to interview you. Tell us what you know. Tell us where you're at, blah, blah, blah. How does he not get interviewed? I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
He never did, Andy. And he was the only parent, by the way. Again, I'll reiterate, the only parent, because even Todd Moore, Michael Moore's father, who was an over-the-road truck driver, so he was verifiably out of the state when the boys vanished, they even interviewed him. And here's the thing. He was Stevie's custodial parent when he vanishes. He's the parent in charge.
Wow.
And the statistics, overwhelmingly, if a child is murdered in this country, it is a parent or step-parent. It's not even
that's
close.
What I mean. It's like you always start with the family. I mean, so what happens now? You said at 2022, now this judge is balking. They're balking at testing, doing the DNA testing. So what play that out. What happens then?
So long story short, it moves on to it goes up to the Arkansas Supreme Court. Of course, it sits there for months and months and months and months and a year, and they don't do anything because you know how that process goes. Well, then finally, the Arkansas Supreme Court came back in April of 2024 and said, in a 4-3 decision, it was close, that the testing should go forward, the requested testing. And so we've got a new prosecutor at this point.
Right, so that's 15 months ago. So
yeah.
What's happened?
So again, the prosecutor, she is a new prosecutor. She said she wanted to do the testing, and she eventually finally agreed to it. They had a hearing several weeks ago. Andy, I never understand why this takes so long in our judicial system.
They haven't done the testing yet?
No.
My God.
And
it was allowed in April of 2024. The Arkansas Supreme Court said it can be tested?
Yes.
Good God. My goodness.
There's no explanation for it, but...
So is the testing going to be just for touch DNA on the shoelaces?
No, and that was another... Now, there was some points of contention, I should clarify. Technically, Damian Eccles was the only one of the three who was actually asking for the testing. And one of the things that the prosecutors wanted is they wanted all three defendants to be on board with it. And so finally, they got Jason Baldwin and Jesse Miskelly Jr. to agree to do the testing too. Officially, it's not that they were against it, because there is, and Andy, this, there's some potential once you start doing this DNA testing that it could destroy the evidence. That there's always that possibility. So they wanted them all on board, and they wanted to do more testing than just the ligatures. And so they got together at this hearing and they decided they were going to retest a bunch of the hairs too. So, because, back in 2007, you actually had to have the root or the bulb, of a hair to get some DNA out of it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there are labs that can actually test without the bulb. And determine.
I know. It's amazing. In my Starbuck murders case, we tested a hair. It was found in a crime scene in 1960. Now, it had a root, but the lab I used, Bodie Technology, was saying you don't necessarily need a root anymore. That's
the lab that's going to do the testing in this case, too.
Amazing. So basically, we're waiting for further forensic testing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. What a saga. The other thing I think is powerful, it reminds me of what I love is it sounds like the first documentary in 1996 had some influence on shining a light on the case. Your reporting had influence on shining a light on the case. I love how you can use the media to, raise awareness of an injustice, because oftentimes the state's attorney's office is not doing their job until they're forced to. With our Murder in the Park, our documentary is what caused the Cook County State's Attorney's Office to finally roll the sleeves up, investigate the case, and it led to the exoneration of Al Story Simon. So I think it's the investigative journalism and the attention it brings to the case that is so powerful. My goodness. So how are these three guys, Damien, Jesse, and Jason, doing today?
As far as I know, Jesse, the day that he left prison, moved right back into the trailer house that he was living in the day he got arrested. He, when people talk about, I see people online, they'll talk about, oh, well, Jesse's, a lot sharper than they say, and he didn't, falsely confess. Andy, he literally got arrested not once, but several times for driving a car without a license plate, without car insurance, without a driver's license, in the dark.
Oh my gosh.
And the headlights don't work on this car.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, literally, I get a call one morning, on Monday morning, and they're like, you do know that Jesse's in jail in the Crittenden County Jail right now? And I was like, you're kidding, for what? And they gave me the charge. So then I called the prosecutor and I said, because, these guys, there's an addendum to their plea deal is that they can get 10 years for committing any other crime, an automatic 10-year sentence.
Gosh.
And I called the prosecutor and I said, so are you going to, put this 10-year thing?
Violate his parole or whatever?
Yeah, like something like that. And he goes, if I did that, these West Memphis Three supporters would march to my house and burn it to the ground. And I said, yeah, that's probably true.
Well, people don't, it sounds like kind of a classic case of a false confession, with Jesse, where the confession doesn't match the crime scene. It doesn't match the evidence. He's talking about a rope. It's not a rope. It's shoelaces. People just don't understand. And I don't think they understood in 1993 the way we do now, that false confessions are real. Mm-hmm. We have science to back it up. We know what the factors are. It sounds like Jesse checks some of the boxes, which is lack of education, age, things like that. And I don't know what the circumstances were of his interrogation, but I'm just so puzzled by the case, and I'm just so puzzled by motive, because if it be one boy that was killed, you can see that somebody may have killed their own child, but to kill two friends as well, mm-hmm. And whoever did it, to kill all three boys, to then, and I do think the hog tie sounds more consistent with like transport. Like, you're not hog tying them. Like, that's probably why you're just carrying that. Like, that's why they're hog tied. In fact, I'll give you a good example from the Starved Rock murders. The women's bodies are found in a shallow little cave, and their bodies are displayed, like laid out, mm-hmm. clothing pulled down, underwear pulled down, and there's twine around two of the women's wrists. Okay. But what the notes said, the crime lab notes were, there was no tension on the twine. And I had a couple, and I mentioned that on a podcast, and I had a couple paramedics reach out to me and say, you know what? We oftentimes tie limbs together because when we're transporting the body, you don't want the arms flapping around. You need to have them kind of secure. So I was like, wow, that really, especially in this case where the bodies are getting dragged up into a little shallow cave, So the hog tied makes sense as a way of transport, right? Mm-hmm. But I've got so many questions about the motive and, the whole way the thing went down. I'm gonna maybe have to have another episode where we just take a deep dive into the crime scene and we kind of play profiler, because it just.
Oh, hey, I'll give you a fun fact. So when they put a bunch of information about this case into like an AI simulator, they asked the AI, they said, so what would be the profession of the person who could have possibly committed this crime? The first thing that popped up was someone who worked in the meatpacking industry from like the mid-1970s to the mid-1990s. Guess who worked in the meatpacking industry for 3 years?
No way.
Terry Hobbs.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Holy cow. So do you continue to follow the story? Are you like all over it still?
Oh yeah. I wrote a story the other day whenever and the judge that ordered the new DNA testing to go forward now was the same judge who denied it 2 years ago.
Really? Wow. Wow. Well, at least it's going forward, and in my Starbuck murders case, the state's attorney's office opposed to me doing the DNA testing. They're actually opposed to me. Let me backtrack. They were opposed to me looking at the evidence. Like just me using my eyeballs to look at the evidence. They opposed that. And we're gonna have another one. We delve into this a little deeper. So we're gonna have to stay in touch. I can't wait to hear how this plays out. I know it takes time to do the DNA testing and to get everything done and get all the results analyzed. That'll be super interesting. And what I had to do in my case was, so we did a DNA test on the hair, Bodhi Technology. It was a male profile, not Chester Weger. But the case was so old, we didn't have enough, I don't know what the technical term is. We didn't have enough matches in terms of loci, whatever you want to call it, to submit it to a national CODIS database, the National DNA Database. But we used a company in Texas called Othram, who I know you're familiar with, David Middleman and his group. And they got a genetic genealogy profile, and that's how we linked this hair to one of three brothers. So you could get a DNA result. It's not one of the three. It's not Damien, Jesse, or Jason. But if they're not, if the DNA profile is somebody who has not offended and is not in CODIS, you're not going to know who it is unless you maybe take it to the second step, which is the genetic genealogy, which is mind-boggling technology now to think that we're solving crimes in that fashion.
Yeah.
That's the way the Idaho murder case got cracked.
Yeah.
Brian Koberger, his DNA's on the knife sheath. Okay. That was a big screw up. And he's not in CODIS. His DNA hasn't been taken, but they do the genetic genealogy and they can kind of match it up. So, wow, I'm gonna be so on the edge of my seat to wait to see how this turns out. And I know you will keep me apprised of what happens. And as soon as we got a result, we'll get back on here and we will record some more. Any parting thoughts before we go?
No, I'm hopeful that there is touch DNA on those ligatures.
Yeah. And you know what I always say, and I said this in my Chester Weger Starbuck murders case, and he passed away, I don't know if everybody knows that, but he passed away June 22nd, which a week after this judge's ruling, which was so wrong. So I can't even appeal now, which is ultra tragedy. But I'm not just seeking justice for Chester Weger and his family. I'm seeking justice for the victims. So it's not just justice for Damien, Jason, and Jesse. It's justice for Steve, Michael, and Christopher and their families, primarily, to know what's the real truth, who committed this crime, who is responsible, right? I mean, that's what people lose sight of sometimes. It's the victims, and what really happened here. So I hope there's a final chapter. I hope there's some finality. In your case, I'm still trying to get that in my Starbuck murders case. So we'll stay in touch, and I think we'll be back here sometime later this year with a round two. So great talking to you as always, George.
Great talking to you, Andy. Have a great day, my friend.